my PhD, we were aware that this behaviour was happening in the city of Melbourne and that it was potentially getting worse over time. We weren't really sure. But we were really keen to try and find ways that we could improve habitat for some of those really small birds within our city, because there's so many people and councils and different land management groups that really want to try and attract these birds back to Melbourne. So I wanted to know what makes a site suitable for bush birds or those small birds. And we basically thought that it was either going to be the habitat, so the types of plants that people might have in their gardens, their local park, whether we've got big tall canopy trees or shrubs or anything like that, or it's going to be the bullies. It's going to be the noisy miners who are kind of calling the shots and deciding which birds occur where. So I spent an enormously long amount of time walking around the streets of Melbourne and writing down which birds I found in different suburbs. So this is an example of one of my suburbs. This is from Burwood. Does anyone go to Deakin Uni? Hey, all right, Deakin Uni is like right down there. So this is just behind the university. And each of those yellow dots is a survey site that I was visiting. You'll see that most of these sites are in residential streets. So I spent an enormous amount of time standing on nature strips, footpaths, having some really interesting conversations with people who lived there, who would come out and be like, "What are you doing?" Because obviously I'm there with binoculars as well. Like that's pretty threatening. So mainly in residential streets. In this suburb, we've also got a couple of sites that were along a creek. This is Gardeners Creek in this case. And then down the bottom there, we've got one that's in an area of open parkland. So it's pretty much just grass, maybe some scattered trees, not much else going on. And in total, I visited 30 different suburbs across Melbourne. So not just Burwood, but 29 other places. If you're a Melburnian, this map will make sense to you, otherwise less so. But basically, places that were in the northern and eastern parts of our city. So these areas would have once been covered by woodlands and forests. Some places still have a decent amount of that vegetation left, others less so. And in total, I conducted 1,500 bird surveys across these areas. So 50 surveys per site, a lot of time of me, a pair of binoculars, and not much else. So what did I find? What makes a site suitable for bush birds? Before I talk you through this, I'll just point you to the bottom corner here. So anywhere in this figure where you see a cross, that's going to suggest that this is a negative response or a negative relationship. So, for example, it might mean that bush birds don't like sites that have more canopy trees. And anywhere where we have a tick, that's the opposite. That's going to be a positive response. So that's something that they do like. That's a site where we're likely to kind of find more of them or find a greater diversity of them. So bush birds in urban areas of Melbourne are super keen on having three things. They want canopy trees, they want mid-story, so this is plants that are somewhere between 2 to 5 metres tall, and they want to have some shrubs as well, so things that are, say, 0.5 metre tall up to 2 metres tall. And ideally, they want all three of those at the one location. So by having all these different layers of vegetation, they've got places where they can hide, places where they can build nests, places where they can find their food. So all super important. I also found that they really didn't like exotic trees. So what I mean by that is tree species that have been introduced to Australia. So this might be things like plane trees, pine trees, different trees from England or North America. They're not keen on those. They want to have native trees, which in where I was surveying was largely gum trees. However, despite these different relationships with various types of habitat, the number one thing that is affecting where bush birds can occur in our city are noisy miners. They were the strongest driver of where they turned up, how many different species turned up. So they're really having a massive impact on the other birds within urban areas. So after I had a look at bush birds, I was also keen to check out what was going on with noisy miners. What is it that they liked? Because maybe we could just try and stuff some things up for them. And what I found was that similar to bush birds, they also liked having more canopy tree cover. And interestingly, they liked having really big, old eucalypt trees. So I had a few sites where there were massive old river red gums. So we're talking 200 to 300-year-old trees. And we thought that they might be quite important for some of those smaller birds like spotted pardalotes, but nope, they're just a beacon for noisy miners. That doesn't mean we should cut down trees that are 200 to 300 years old. I would never suggest that. But it does mean that we need to keep this in mind, that these massive old trees potentially have lots of food for noisy miners in the form of those lerps, the little sugary things that they're getting off the leaves. So yeah, something that we need to consider. The good news, noisy miners hate shrubs. If we had a site, whether that was a street, a park, whatever, and there was lots of shrubs there, I was less likely to record noisy miners. So this could be a way that we could make things a little bit worse for them and a little bit better for our bushbird friends. And the last thing, it's like our bushbirds, they also didn't like exotic trees. They wanted to have their trees native, so in this case, pretty much eucalypts, likely because that's where their food's coming from. So, I mentioned towards the start of my talk that noisy miners are, in fact, a native species. So you might be wondering, why are they so problematic now? What has happened that things have gotten out of control and they're taking over our city? I'm going to demonstrate for you with this very low-tech animation. So if we imagine that this is a patch of woodland or forest, and let's say it's the year 1750. White man hasn't arrived here yet. There's no development, no nothing. So in this context, noisy miners would have been hanging out around the edges of this patch of woodland, because that's their preferred areas to be. They want to be somewhere that's a little bit more open. They've still got their big trees, but they're certainly not venturing into the centre of this patch. So if you're a spotted pardalote living in 1750, there's heaps of places in the middle here where you can live, and you're never going to come into contact with a noisy miner. You can go about your day, find your food, do your thing, and you'll never see them. Now, let's flash forward to 2025. This patch of bushland is going to be developed as a new housing estate. What tends to happen is we start clearing the vegetation. The first thing that goes in are some roads, because we've got to get vehicles in there. Then we're going to build some houses, some more. And as we go, we're clearing more and more of this native woodland patch. And when we're done, pretty much everywhere is edge. Everywhere is suitable for our noisy miners. So if you're a spotted pardalote today, there's virtually nowhere in this landscape that you can live where you're not going to come into contact with them. And that makes it really hard for you to do your thing, because you're constantly being chased, harassed. It's hard for you to find your food, potentially find a mate, all the stuff you got to do. So it's no wonder that they're kind of losing ground and being pushed out. And we can see this everywhere across Melbourne. Does anyone have a park that looks like one of these close to where you live? Yeah, cool. So super lovely and green. People would look at this and go, that's a lovely park. I'd love to take my kids here or whatever. But it's pretty shit if you're a native bird that's not a noisy miner, because all we've got is super heavily mown lawn and a couple of scattered trees. They are native trees, I think, in all three, but there's nothing else. So this is what some people refer to as lollipop parks, because we've pretty much just got isolated little lollipop trees. And lollipop parks are perfect for noisy miners. And the same goes in our streets. You know, with our nature strips, it's just lawn and a couple of trees, nothing else. That's exactly what noisy miners are looking for. But this is the twist in this story. Did noisy miners make these spaces? No, of course they didn't. They're birds. We made these spaces. So I would advocate that it's not really the noisy miners' fault that they have adapted super well to the places that we have designed. I would say that's probably our fault. So potentially in this story, the noisy miner is getting a bit of a bad rap, and if anything, it's us. We should be taking a good hard look at us and the spaces that we're making if we care about the other birds that are sharing our city. All right, so as far as I can tell, we've got two options here in terms of how we manage this issue without going and shooting a bunch of noisy miners, which I think everyone in this room hopefully agrees we'd like to avoid. So the first management option actually wasn't my original idea. So I give a lot of community talks and I go out to friends of groups. Does anyone know what a friends of group is? Excellent. Okay, if you haven't encountered a friends of group, imagine a room of retirees with grey hair, and they just love the environment so much. They're just super pumped about their local patch or their local creek. They go out and do a whole bunch of planting. They pick up litter. They're super cute. It's very, very wholesome. And this little old lady got up at one of my talks. She said that she had a question. The other thing about friends of groups is they don't understand what the term question is, because it's generally more of a comment. And she said, I know how to get rid of noisy miners. I've done it in my own backyard. And I was like, that's fantastic. Please share. So she said that what she did was one day she had this idea and she went down to Bunnings to get some supplies. And don't ask me how, but somehow she made herself one of these guys. And this little old lady has been sitting on her back porch somewhere in Melbourne and firing frozen peas at any noisy miner that turns up in her backyard, which I loved. It was fantastic. And she assured me that she's a terrible shot. She's actually never hit them, but it's enough to scare them away. So that's an option, but it's kind of labour intensive to roll out everywhere in Melbourne. So it's not generally what I recommend. What I tend to recommend to people who have their own garden or to local councils or friends of groups is to get out there and plant shrubs. This is what we're missing in most of Melbourne. We've got plenty of lawn in most areas, at least. We've got native trees. We do not have this. This is a picture from a development down in Cape Patterson. They claim to be the most sustainable housing development in Australia. I have no idea if that's true. But they do have really good shrubs, so I'll give them a tick for that. So next time you see a noisy miner or you hear their horrendous repetitive calls, just remember that they're not really the problem. We are. And take this bird as your reminder to get out there and plant lots and lots and lots of shrubs wherever you can. Thank you so much, folks.
Chef's kiss. What a brilliant first talk. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
For those of you who haven't been to Nerd Night, now is your opportunity to ask some questions of our esteemed experts. And so if you have some questions that are bubbling up in your head, now is the time. I'll start us off just so that you don't have too much pressure on you. Did you think when you started your PhD that it would be that you'd be thinking so much about urban design?
No. I'm an ecologist by training. All I've ever thought about is animals. And then, suddenly I'm actually now in an interdisciplinary lab where I sit next to someone who is a urban planner, and there's an architect. There's folks who have wildly different backgrounds to my own. So it's been a wild ride.
Very cool. All right, let's put it out to the audience. Do we have any questions from this? I was going to say titillating talk, but that's a type of bird, isn't it? A tit?
It is. But
there we go. Not bad. Our winner, go for it.
How big an area does it have to be to give the smaller bush birds?
How big of an area is required so that we give a fighting chance to the bush birds?
That is a question that, sadly, we need more research. So if you want to fund me, I'll do it for you. But yeah, basically the general rule is bigger is always better. So places like, say, creek lines where people have planted alongside, if they're super, super narrow, we tend to see that the noisy miners will invade regardless. So yeah, generally the bigger you can make the patch and the less linear is always going to be better.
Great. And you could have sold your symphony tickets for $200 and contributed to the cause. I mean, you've missed your window. All right, other questions from the audience? Yeah.
Did you spot any rare birds while you were doing this survey?
Oh.
Great question. So you're doing 1,500 surveys. Did along that path, all that time, and with your binoculars, spot any rare birds, or what was maybe a highlight that you
Yeah,
experienced?
so the only, I guess, threatened species that I recorded throughout my surveys was the gang cockatoo. Which is, if you haven't seen that, Google it. It's a beautiful native bird. It's mostly grey, but the boys have this incredible red hairdo, like a mohawk almost. Yeah, they're fantastic. So that's the only threatened species that I saw, unfortunately.
And they've got some beautiful gangs at the Healesville Sanctuary.
Yes.
Plug. Yeah.
Did any miners go after you while you were
Were you swooped? Were you
Great
swooped? Were you
question.
worried about your safety?
So not during my fieldwork, but like yes, in life, definitely. So there was some last spring that were nesting in the next street from where I live, and there was like a period of time where you just couldn't walk through there because they were horrendous.
As a Canadian, I'd never have a bird swoop at me, and we lived in Wagga Wagga and for 2.5 years. And these stupid, it was plovers and magpies and the miners, they're all swooping, and I'm like, everyone warned me about the snakes and the spiders. What the fuck? No one said you got to worry about the birds too. Somebody else over there, yes, go for it.
what was the weirdest non-bird related thing you saw?
The weirdest
Non-bird related thing. Spend all that time out on the street.
Yeah. Okay, so the question was weirdest non-bird thing that I saw in my 1,500 surveys. Like, I don't know if it was a thing, but I met some weird people. Yeah, just like I remember some woman coming up and being like, oh, we got to fix this creek line thing. And I don't think she thought I worked for Melbourne Water or the local council or something. I had no idea what she was talking about. So people would often just start ranting at me about something in their local area.
You always just say, I agree, I'm going to get Bruce on that.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
we got a question in the back, yep.
Apart from planting more plants, what are some other activities we can do in our own lives to help?
I love that question.
Yes.
In your own life, if you have some property, what are, aside from maybe planting a shrubbery, what are the things that we can do? Maybe it is a shrubbery, and maybe you can give us some suggestions of I want to say shrubbery. We've all seen Monty Python.
Yeah,
The whole time we've been thinking about the word shrubbery. Right? I'm not, okay.
Yep. So other than planting, obviously it's best if you're planting locally native plants because that's what our birds have co-evolved with. That's where they're going to find most of their food. Other than that, it's really great if you can get bird baths. If you have a garden or a courtyard or whatever, especially in the warmer months because water's a really limiting resource in our city. There's not always places where birds can drink and safely have a bath. So if you have some kind of elevated bird bath, they will love that, especially if it's paired with shrubs. So yeah, I would say do both.
I got one, but they didn't like it. They wouldn't stay still for me. Bathing them. Sorry, that was not... You go for it.
Why are they so angry?
Why are they so angry?
I honestly don't know. Like, this is a natural behaviour. We also see it in some of their closest relatives. So bell miners or bellbirds are also a little bit this way inclined, but not as widespread. So I don't know. I guess it's just something that's worked for them. So maybe they've evolved it over time, and those who are more angry are more successful.
Don't take life lessons from that last comment.
No, don't do
please.
that.
The world the way it is right now. We're going to do 2 more. Is that okay? Does 2 more seem like the right amount? Okay, 3 more. Yep, go for it. Favorite good guy bird. Love it.
Well, obviously I like fairy wrens. Technically this is not the one that we have here. We were talking about this earlier. This is a splendid fairy wren. We have a superb fairy wren. Whatever, close enough. Yes, I love fairy wrens. I also like, my favourite bird is much bigger than the ones I showed, so that's a yellow-tailed black cockatoo. Sounds like a dinosaur, and it's awesome. I guess it is a dinosaur, but yeah, present-day dinosaur.
How do you name, like, who, is there a spectacular fairy wren? Like, who? The nomenclature's
like
fascinating.
it's old white guys. I don't know what they're saying.
All right, there's a couple more. Yeah, go for it.
As a caution for those of us who want to go talk to our councils about this,
Yes.
has a council ever hilariously misinterpreted your instructions on
That's a lovely question. So if we want to talk to our councils, we want to advocate for the wildlife in our neighborhoods, what's the way that we do that and we do it with the right messaging so they don't misinterpret what you've done?
Yeah. So sometimes been a couple of councils recently that have put out biodiversity strategies for public consultation. So that's one way that you can kind of talk about these issues with your council. Or sometimes they'll also have opportunities where you can comment on, I don't know, a plan for a parkland that they're looking to kind of restore or regenerate. So that could be like a targeted thing, be like, get some shrubs in there. One thing that councils are considering these days is nature strip planting. So it is allowed in some parts of Melbourne, not allowed in others. It's a bit weird. So that's definitely something that you can kind of push to your council as well, to be like, hey, we should be allowed to plant something other than shit lawn outside our house.
Down with shit lawn.
Yeah.
Down with shit. One final question. We're good. Oh, there it is.
Yes.
Okay, so really lifting the positivity here.
Yeah,
Are there stats about
we're ending
injuries and
high.
people getting injured by miners?
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, I think there's
You're a
probably
writer
been
on
lot
CSI
more-
or something like that, and you're just like,
There's probably a lot more focused on Australian magpies swooping. Like, that's kind of the bird we think of when it's swoopy boy season. Less so miners, but yeah, they can definitely still do damage for sure. So you're not alone.
One of the many, many things I love about Nerd Night is you see a talk like this and it changes the way that you see the world around you and your environment. And I suspect that tomorrow morning when you're going for a walk with the dog and you get swooped by a miner or you hear them in the distance, you will be thinking of Jacinta. And put your hands together to show your appreciation right now for that.